Good job. I'm glad you made it through that section. It was tough for me too. What's next? We can balance, we can turn. Now we need to know how to stop. I'm really only going to cover 2 points in this section. 2 things that are all too often done wrong. Master these and your braking skills will be there when you need them. What are they? You need to be very comfortable with your front brake and you need to be smooth. First, a little motivation. Something you have all heard before, speed kills. Yes, speed is fun, but when something goes wrong, the less of it you have, the better. In an emergency, your first thought should be brakes. Many riders keep 2 fingers on the brake at all times. This is called covering the brakes, to cut down on their reaction time. Whether you do this or not, there is always reaction time and lever free play that delays your braking. Perhaps during this time you might realize that accelerating or turning could be a better choice. My experience is that this should be fairly rare. If you brake, you are reducing your risk. Every mile per hour you lose helps you. If you don't do this, it's a gamble that you better have right. You may not have a second chance. If you find that braking is not your first choice most of the time, I would seriously reevaluate what you think happens in a crash. Before a crash, you have some choices. Once it starts, things happen quickly and your mind will not be fast enough to keep up. Things you think are happening now will have already happened. Whatever you think you are going to do, it's probably already too late. A friend of mine years ago knew someone who claimed that he would quickly put on his seatbelt if he ever saw an accident about to happen. Don't be that person. Be conservative about your choices. It may be that you will want to brake and swerve. We'll get to this later because it is a very important evasive strategy. But it begins with braking, so braking should be your first thought. Generally, I use my reaction time to check behind me. Actually, this is true every time I brake. And you want to brake well. At higher speeds, you will cover a lot of ground as you slow down. I don't want to lead anyone into thinking that high speed goes away easily because it doesn't. But at slower speeds, say 20, 30, or 40, you might surprise yourself by how fast you can stop. You can lose that 20 miles per hour in about the last 20 feet. So with 20 feet to go, don't give up. And even if you can't stop, hitting something at 5 miles per hour is much better than at 10 miles per hour and way better than 20 miles per hour. If you have older friends, you might hear the advice to lay it down. This is not just old school, which it is blatantly stupid. There are no real-world circumstances where this makes sense. Your tires and brakes are very good at slowing you down. Your foot pegs and muffler aren't, and neither are your hands or the seat of your pants. Maybe it's time to mention Allen's rule number 1 for motorcyclists. Never fall down on the street. Okay, let's go to the front brake. If you've ever been given the advice to stay away from your front brake because it might make you skid and fall down, which is what some people say, then I want you to forget that right now. That is also old school. By that I mean, once again, it is stupid and wrong. Your front brake needs to be your best friend. I'll start at the sporting bike end of the spectrum because I really want to stress the front brake here. Here's a picture of a racer. He is braking hard for a turn. Just in case your picture isn't clear enough, his rear tire is off the ground. Is it pretty obvious which brake he's using? Do you know what percent of his braking force is coming from the front brake? 100. Is he using the rear brake? No. This is actually a common sight in racing. It's easy to buy bikes today that are a close approximation to this one. Sport bikes are light. Putting the rider on top makes it top-heavy. Add a lot of braking and you get a huge weight transfer to the front wheel. For me, when I am on a sport bike and I need to slow down or stop quickly, I use only the front brake. I know there is some traction in the rear and I am giving something up by not using it. But I also feel that by splitting my concentration, I will lose more braking in the front than I will gain in the rear. It will be very hard to keep the rear from skidding with so little weight on it, and the concentration required will be a distraction I don't need. Okay, that is one extreme. Statistics say that average bikes get 75 to 80% of their braking from the front. The following numbers I'm making up myself, but you'll get the idea. Sport bikes may get maybe 95. Sport touring bikes maybe 85. Touring bikes maybe 70, with a passenger and luggage maybe 50. These numbers refer to a dry road. On a wet road, you will brake a lot less and have much less weight transfer and have a lot more braking potential at the rear. So you know what bike you have. You might give it a little thought as to how much weight is on the rear. On any given day, based on your load and road conditions, you should try to have an idea about how much of your braking force can come from the front and how much from the rear. If you need to brake hard, you will use that information in determining how hard to apply each brake. Ask yourself whether you have enough braking force in the rear to make it worth the trouble. If not, brake only in the front. If you use both brakes, apply them together, but keep your focus on the front. What you don't want to do is focus on the rear. The front brake will almost always have more braking potential than the rear. If you can afford it, get a bike with ABS. ABS pretty much takes care of this issue. I'll get back to ABS in a minute. As for skidding and falling down, either brake can do this to you, but neither one should. That's why we want to be smooth. To quote one of my instructors again, we have all heard the terms hitting the brakes, grabbing the brakes. Here's the deal. We never ever want to do this. We never even want to think in these terms. In fact, we do not want to ever use these words. We squeeze the brakes. We use them gradually and smoothly. Being quick is good, but good riders can be quick and still be smooth. But you want to be smooth first, work on quick later. Why is this important? 2 reasons. I'll dispense with one quickly. You certainly never want to grab the front brake and get the braking force on the front wheel before the weight gets there. The weight transfers pretty quickly, but you can beat it if you try. You would be skidding the front tire before you got enough weight there to do any real braking. The more important reason to be smooth is this. You want to increase your lever pressure gradually up to just below the point of tire slippage, and then you want to keep it there. As you do this, you might occasionally go too far and detect some loss of traction. If you were smooth, you will know that you have not gone too far over the limit. The tire may have lost traction, but it won't have lost much rotational speed. You will not need to release the pressure much in order to get the traction back. If the wheel skids a little, you will recover easily. This will not make you fall down. You will be braking the whole time, having only released a little, and you will be back on full braking quickly. This is a good scenario. This is your goal. Let's compare that to the bad scenario. You grab the brakes too hard, the front tire starts to skid, you have gone quite some ways beyond max pressure, and so the front wheel has lost a lot of speed. You need to back off a lot, both because you went too far and because the wheel has more spinning up to do, and you need it to happen quickly. It is not uncommon for people to get off the brakes completely. So where are you? You were so scared that you weren't stopping fast enough that you overcooked the brakes, you had to back off, and now you are not even braking anymore. Sound like fun? Do you know what happens next? If you have time, and you might not, you're likely to repeat the cycle. Let me go back to the hurt report for a second. A major contributor to accidents was locking up the rear wheel, skidding, and falling down. This is a common scenario if you use only the rear brake. You brake with the rear, you are not stopping fast enough, so you brake harder. Skidding is inevitable. And then you don't have many choices. If you've gone sideways, the rule is to keep the wheel locked. A good rider can keep the bike upright, but a lesser rider heading towards something he doesn't want to hit won't be able to. So be smooth. If you were smooth, you can skid the front wheel and get away with it. The same with the back. Catch it before it goes to the side. We have talked a lot about your front tire contact patch. You want to make this an extension of your mind. There should be places in your brain that are hardwired to keep tabs on this. You want to know all the time where it is and how much traction it has. This is never more true than when you are braking. Just don't look at it. Let me conclude this section by going back to ABS. ABS is a marvelous invention. If this is a choice for you, take it. People who malign it don't understand it. Here's what you need to know. You brake with ABS the same way as you do without it. You still don't grab the brakes. You still give the weight transfer a chance. You'd still like to control the brakes by yourself to just below the limit of traction, because you will have more traction than when the ABS is cycling. So you still want to be smooth, but you want to be more aggressive with your lever pressure, front and rear. You should take more of a chance of braking too hard because the ABS will save you. Done correctly, you can keep your ABS nearer the limit more of the time. You can always see how close you are to the limit by bumping into it occasionally. This is something you can practice. In the last magazine comparison I read, the pro rider stopped better without the ABS. but it took him 4 tries to do it. By his own admission, in the real world, you don't get 4 tries. You need to brake hard with no warning. How well do you know what is on the road right now without looking? What was in that shadow? Was that section dry? How slippery were those leaves? This is where ABS will save you. Maybe the pro can beat the ABS in a controlled environment, but you are not in a controlled environment. And then, maybe you're not a pro.